Good morning, everyone. Bonjour tout le monde. Tansei tuau. It's great to be here at Maddie's Place for a great announcement in partnership between the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta. Minister Nixon, thank you for joining us today. It's a pleasure to share the microphone with you, particularly when it means that more people are going to have a roof over their heads. I want to thank Murray Soroka, I want to thank Taylor, and I want to acknowledge that we are here on Treaty 6 territory in the Métis Nation of Alberta, District 9. Friends, a home is more than just a roof overhead. It's the foundation for building a life, chasing opportunities, and strengthening our communities. But for too many people, finding a stable home is still a challenge. Tout le monde au Canada mérite un logement sûr et abordable. Mais pour trop de gens, ce n'est toujours pas le cas. Every person in our country has a right to safe housing regardless of their circumstances. Addressing housing and homelessness is our federal government's top priority. And I really am pleased in the relationship that Minister Nixon and I have developed over the years and with our government, that this is a shared area of responsibility, and both the Government of Canada and the Government of Alberta take it seriously. And that's why the federal government is making major investments to preserve housing at all levels, making sure that Canadians all have a place to call home. It was just over a year ago that Prime Minister Trudeau and I announced $175 million to fast-track over 5,200 housing units and 22,000 housing units over the next 10 years. Just last week, I announced $46 million to rebuild and renew 1,431 homes here in Edmonton, and $2.5 million specifically to reduce homelessness for our vets who have served us so well in uniform. Now, I want to share something because I think it's really important, and particularly when we have the housing minister here, it matters. As of December 24, Edmonton accounted for 2.5% of the nation's population, and yet our city was responsible for 8% of the country's housing starts. Think about that. 8% of the country's housing starts in our capital city. Why? Because the things that we're doing together with the providers here at Maddie's House, with the work that we've done through the affordable housing programs, means that the city is actually getting things built faster than ever before. Why does it matter? Well, because it only works when all of the parties actually come to the table together. And eliminating chronic homelessness is everybody's business, and it's going to take a coordinated effort to get it done. And working with partners like the Jasper Place Wellness Center are part of that. And more importantly, and I've seen it with the people that I met today, this is a community priority as well as it is a government priority. And that's why today I'm honored to announce on behalf of the federal government $35 million under the Unsheltered Homelessness and Encampments Initiative. C'est un grand honneur pour moi d'annoncer 35 millions de dollars pour des financements pour les foyers plus abordables et pour aider les gens sans abri. This funding is going to support the implementation of the community encampment response plans in Calgary, Edmonton, Red Deer, and Lethbridge. And what it's going to do is it's going to provide additional support to people in need and living without homes. This agreement with Alberta, and Minister Nixon will talk about the Alberta government's portion in a minute, is to help people experiencing unsheltered homelessness in specific municipal regions in our province, particularly those living in encampments, to live in a place like you're all standing in today. It's going to promote shelter safety. It's going to promote accessibility and capacity building, transitional housing and supports for people experiencing homelessness. Funding is also going to be used to increase access to navigation hub services, giving transportation supports, pet care for those exiting encampments, and supporting initiatives tailored and dedicated to populations with specific needs like youth, Indigenous peoples, and families. And when I talked to Taylor when I walked in, one of the things we said was, this is a place where you create community. You have 8 to 12 people living in here. It's a cohort, it's a community. They want to stay because they know they're going to be taken care of. Now, in Budget 24, we put $250 million in this investment. It's going to be cost matched by the provinces and territories, and that's why we're here today. It's also part of our $5 billion over 9 years plan to address homelessness in Canada. And I want to talk about that for 30 seconds. Reaching Home was launched in April 19, and it's an important project for Alberta. Almost $600 million has been invested, will be invested from 2019 to 2028 right here in Alberta to literally help people reach home. What do we do with it? Well, we support the needs of the most vulnerable people in Canada. we improve access to safe, stable, and affordable housing, and we will reduce chronic homelessness. Chers amis, tandis que notre population continue de croître partout au pays, c'est critique et plus que jamais que nous puissions tous nous concentrer sur les priorités et les solutions en matière de logement, en plus de construire des infrastructures appropriées pour bâtir un avenir prospère et durable pour les communautés. Everyone, young, old, middle-aged like me, deserve to have a roof over their heads. And what I love about this space is I feel a real sense of community, and I feel a real sense of partnership with the government of Alberta on this. We've had good conversations, Jason, and I just want to say thank you for the partnership with the government of Alberta, because at the end of the day, we're helping people reach home, and with today's announcement, we're going to see that fewer people than ever are going to call the streets home. So with that, thank you, merci, over to Minister Nixon.
Well, thanks, Randy, for that. Great to see you this morning. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today at Maddie's Place, first of all, with this hard-working team here at Jasper Place Wellness Center. Maddie's Place is the first pre-addiction treatment housing facility in Edmonton, a place that ultimately is going to have significant life-changing impact on many Albertans who are exiting homelessness and ultimately beginning a new journey. And we're excited to see that. We really believe this is another step in ensuring true top-tier wraparound services for Albertans going through recovery from addiction, and is a critical part of Alberta's recovery model. And so we appreciate your efforts, and please know we continue to be a partner with you and want to continue our great work together, as well as I would like to thank Randy for being here for his remarks on another significant amount of investments taking place between both the federal government and the province of Alberta to be able to help care for some of our most vulnerable. Today's announcement ultimately is an agreement between the province and the federal government on funding for Albertans leaving homelessness, and it will have a significant impact on that vulnerable population going forward. This new bilateral agreement ensures that Alberta gets its fair share of federal funding for our Made in Alberta community encampment response plans that get people off the streets and back on their feet. Over the next 2 years, the federal government will contribute about $35 million, I should say $35 million, we won't let them do about, to enhance the support that is available in Edmonton, Calgary, Red Deer, and Lethbridge. I do want to just emphasize those other cities besides Edmonton and Calgary. Former Minister Fraser and I, when we were putting together this deal, wanted to be able to make sure that we were recognizing that homeless challenges were expanding much further than just our two largest cities. And so bringing Lethbridge and Red Deer into the fold is a start of that process. We know we have more work to do across the 7 largest cities in our province, but also across more rural areas, which are going to need different types of solutions to the homeless challenges that they're facing. And so this, I believe, is a recognition of the federal government and the province that we need to continue to expand this conversation much further than our largest cities, while keeping the important work that is taking place in our largest cities going forward. In our province, we recognize that encampments are just not a safe place for vulnerable people to live, especially during harsh and cold winters. Encampments are dangerous. They are places where vulnerable Albertans have frozen to death. They have been victimized by gangs, and far too many people have lost their lives as a result of that. That's why we have in Alberta taken action significantly to increase supports for available shelter, for support services, and for specialized housing across the province. Last year, we made the biggest investment in homeless supports in Alberta's history, nearly $220 million. And through Budget 2025, we are investing even more in this upcoming year on this important issue. Since creating Alberta's Action Plan on Homelessness, Alberta's government has been working diligently to support Albertans experiencing homelessness and helping to make homelessness brief and non-reoccurring. We've been focused on better coordination and strengthening wraparound supports across the province to improve community responses and to achieve better outcomes for those seeking help, including supporting thousands of shelter spaces across the province, including temporary winter shelter spaces in rural communities and over 2,000 spaces here in Edmonton alone, ensuring that 24-hour-a-day, 7-day-a-week shelter operations are available, which we believe it must be established and had to be established, and I know that the City of Edmonton really strongly believed was the most important thing that we had to do, and we're proud that we've been able to accomplish that. We also began offering hundreds of Indigenous-led and women-only shelter spaces, not to be confused with domestic violence shelter spaces, which are important, but a very different focus to be able to make sure women who are experiencing homelessness can provide a safe place to get to shelter as they go through hopefully the process of exiting the streets. And our work with Indigenous shelters here in Edmonton, the work that we've done with Enoch is some of the most special work that I've been able to be a part of as a minister of the Crown. And one of the shelters I'm most proud of in our province that I have to mention is the Blackfoot Department of Health in Lethbridge that runs all of our emergency supports in the city of Lethbridge, our third largest city, and are doing incredible work. Every time that I'm there, I'm very proud of that, and I think this is going to continue to be where you see us continue to invest. We're also providing roughly $100 million last year and another $100 million this year to fund local supportive housing programs above and beyond our normal supportive housing programs that really focus on the type of work that you see taking place right here. In addition to funding thousands of shelter spaces across the province and programs aimed at getting people off the streets and back on their feet, our government established a Navigation Support Centre in Edmonton and Calgary. The Navigation Support Centres provide a one-stop shop for social services where people can access a wide range of supports under one roof, including ID services, financial aid, health services, housing supports, and so much more. Since the first centre opened just 14 months ago, more than 9,000 unique individuals in both cities have been connected to life-changing supports. Our Made in Alberta approach is raising the bar across Canada for how to support people that are in encampments. We are seeing other provinces follow our lead and establish their own navigation centres because, let's face it, Alberta's approach is working. I also want to acknowledge the great work our shelter operators, frontline service providers, and other partners are doing to help homelessness in Alberta, to help end homelessness in Alberta, as none of this would be possible without them. Many shelters have adjusted their service delivery to provide faster access to supports, including access to treatment and recovery services. We are continuing to work closely with our frontline partners to address challenges and to ensure people are getting the help that they need. Today's another significant step in our fight, though, to reduce homelessness. This new bilateral agreement will support all of the fantastic work that our province is already doing to support vulnerable Albertans. This funding will provide immediate support in Lethbridge, Edmonton, Calgary, and Red Deer. Projects that will benefit from this additional funding have been selected, and our government is finalizing grant agreements with our partners. This money will support projects aimed at creating long-term transitional shelter solutions, enhancing capacity in the shelter system, and improving support for existing outreach to system navigation initiatives that connect people to services. We'll be sharing more about specific projects once grant agreements are all in place, but a few examples of agreements that have already been signed include more than doubling the women-only shelter spaces in Calgary, expanding transitional shelter spaces and increasing access to shelters in Edmonton, creating navigation supports in Red Deer, and increasing transitional housing capacity for people awaiting addiction treatment in Lethbridge, just to name a couple projects. This partnership with the federal government will go a long way towards supporting the province's efforts to remove encampments and to get people to the help that they need. Addressing homelessness is a shared responsibility between all levels of government. This agreement ensures that Ottawa is stepping up to help Alberta's most vulnerable get off the streets and to make sure that we create a more stable situation in our communities. Alberta's government continues to work tirelessly to ensure that vulnerable Albertans have access to the help that they need, and this additional funding is a great addition to the nearly $500 million Alberta's government has invested between Budget 2024 and Budget 2025 in homelessness initiatives. I'd like to take a moment and thank both Randy and I's current colleague as MP, but both Randy and I's former ministerial colleague, the Honourable Sean Fraser, for collaborating with Alberta's government to ensure Ottawa is stepping up and doing its part to support the most vulnerable Albertans. We would not be here without his leadership, and I really enjoyed working with him on this project. I think it really shows that while we are in a partisan world, Randy, we often all have the same goals. And so this is a great example of both governments coming together, a conservative government in Alberta and a liberal government in Ottawa coming together to be able to care for our most vulnerable. And so I thank Sean and I thank Randy and all of his colleagues for supporting us in this work. And I know together we are going to continue to make Alberta the best place to live in, to retire in, to raise a family in, and the best place ultimately to overcome things like addictions and homelessness. So again, thank you for all of your efforts here at this beautiful location, and I know Randy and I would be happy to take some questions.
That concludes the formal portion of our announcement, and we'll move on to Q&A with media. For any of those in the room wishing to ask a question, there is a mic over there, but I recognize it's pretty tight in here. So if you kind of just want to move to the front where we can kind of see you, that would be helpful. And please make sure to name your name and outlet for the record. We'll be doing one question, one follow-up, and we'll start out in the room. And I think I see one question.
I think I'm the only one, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure who might be best to answer this. Jasmine King from Edmonton. You kind of spoke about how a bit it will be used, but how will we really see this money kind of broken down within the municipality?
We will, again, this money from the federal partnership will go to Calgary, Edmonton, Lethbridge, and Red Deer. It will be broken down very similar to how we break down current homeless funding based on population. So the exact breakdown, I mean, we'd be happy to provide you. I won't want to quote just in case I get slightly off, but each of those cities will be receiving a share of that funding that would be equivalent to their size and to the work that they're doing with the homeless population.
And I guess just for a follow-up, how many people are we currently seeing that are still...
I should have checked if Randy wanted to add to that, but I think, yeah, okay.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
That are still, using encampments and not using shelters. How many people are we seeing do that, and how many are we hoping are now going to be using this?
Well, the reality is I don't think that that's possible for anybody to answer. We do a process between both the federal and provincial government through multiple different agencies to try to determine what's taking place on the street. This is not obviously a population that we could phone everybody up and see where they've chosen to live. What we do know is that both Calgary and Edmonton are reporting a significant reduction in encampments. Both Calgary and Edmonton have made a decision to remove encampments quickly as they come up, and we know that there will continue to be an element of the population that chooses to stay in encampments, though it's been made clear by those cities that's not appropriate, and so they'll take the action that they feel is necessary to adjust that. I think the number that matters more is the number of increased amount of individuals that we see entering the system to get supports. And so the Navigation Center, which was designed to do that, the Navigation Center is not designed to be the service provider. It's not designed to be the provider of getting people access to housing or anything along those lines. It's designed to get them to the organizations that can do that. And so when we see 9,000 people in our two largest cities coming forward and utilizing that service to get access to it, it does show that large elements of the population are choosing to go that route. We also see that our emergency shelter system, which we have updated, made 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and increased the capacity for sure in our 7 largest cities, particularly here in Edmonton, a commitment I made to the Mayor of Edmonton at the start of my term as Minister that we would complete, that we have now got to that spot where we're not seeing capacity issues. Now that tells us a couple things. One is that we got the number right to build the shelter system originally, but further to that, we are seeing people utilize those services to be able to move to programs like where we're at today. If I started to see large population increases inside our emergency shelter system, I would then start to have concerns that we are not providing enough services on the other side of it. But the reality is it's been pretty stable. I think we're like 75% capacity last night in the city of Edmonton. So those are the things that we're looking at. I don't think there's any city in North America that could tell you that there's nobody in an encampment. And so I won't tell you that. What I will tell you is that we're going to be doing everything that we can to make sure that people in encampments have a lot better options than sleeping in minus 30 degrees.
Jasmine, one of the things that we had as our focus, and I want to congratulate Minister Nixon on this. This comes from a meeting, 2 years ago, that you and I had with Minister Fraser at the time, Mayor Sohi at the time, Grand Chief at the time, Cody Thomas, Chief of Enoch, about how the federal dollars could come here to then allow the, work with the province to do more. And as a proud Albertan, I want to see the money come to the order of government that knows what to do best with the money. And the province is now making sure that 4 of our largest cities are going to have even more capacity to do this work. When I'm knocking on doors, you know what people say to me? We don't want people freezing in encampments because they're homeless in the middle of the winter. And we just went through the worst February that I can remember, 10 or 12 days colder than minus 30? No human being should be sleeping in a tent in Edmonton, Calgary, Lethbridge, Red Deer, or any of our cities in Alberta. And the $70 million combined means that Taylor and Jasper Wellness Center can have more Maddie's Places. The fact that the cities are now speeding up, it's not as fast as Sundre, where a permit gets done in 12 hours, but here, the city of Edmonton, they get the concept, they get the model. And so we want to see more of this. We want to see more of this across the province, and that's why today's a great example of all jurisdictions coming together so that we treat our fellow citizens and our neighbors the way they deserve to be treated.
Thank you. Are there any others in the room looking to ask a question?
Dave Mitchell.
Hey, Dave.
What did it actually take for your two groups to, actually work together and come to an agreement like this, provide some money and show everybody that you can work together? Was it a simple phone call? Is it that easy, or how did this happen?
I'll start, and you can follow up. Look, relationships, you got to go behind the closed doors and have a chat and be frank with each other. And I think it came down to this. We were very frank with Minister Nixon, and he said, look, put money on the table and I'll match it. So, okay, we put money on the table and he's matching it. But it was a conversation about jurisdiction and priorities and making sure that the money would go to the province and the province would then be able to work through its system. And that's what we do in Quebec. It's what we do in Ontario. It's what we do in New Brunswick. And the relationship that Minister Nixon and Minister Fraser, that I had, and that Amarjeet has, that Mayor of Calgary had, all of it comes together to say at the end of the day, we've got to help people. And that's what happened behind closed doors. And now we're here in public saying that the $70 million and more is flowing to our communities.
Yeah, look, I think that, again, I gave credit to him in my speaking notes. I did that for a reason. I don't do that at every time I speak on behalf of the province, but, former Minister Fraser was a very good federal counterpart. And I think Sean and I together were able to have very frank conversations behind closed doors. And, the federal government wanted certain things, wanted to participate in certain things in the province. And I expressed very sternly and politely that they need to put some money on the table and that Alberta would not be paying the full bill. And lo and behold, Sean showed up with the money. And so I decided to match it. And I think together we're going to be able to care for people. Look, at the end of the day, there's always going to be differences between governments, certainly always going to be differences between the province and the federal government. But what I do think is that people on all sides of the aisle in Randy and I's business, that we all are, at the end of the day, truly just want to care for our communities. And so this is a population that needs significant investment. It's important to Randy and I as Albertans, and so we both went to our governments, advocated for what we need in our community, and I think this is a great example of how the federal government and the province can work together despite other political differences.
Is it somewhat disappointing that it took this long to happen? This problem's been a problem for decades, and here we are finally in 2025 saying we're getting it done, but this could have been done years ago.
Well, look, I think the reality is the situation that we see taking place on the streets in Alberta has accelerated very quickly in the last couple of years. To say that the province and the federal government have not been investing in this issue for decades would not be true. They have been. But what we are seeing across Canada, across North America, from the fentanyl epidemic and other things that we see taking place on the streets, is a rapidly accelerating situation that requires more significant investment by the government. And that's what you've seen is government step up to respond to that. Look, I used to work frontline work in the homeless sector. I can remember the very first OD in the mustard seed in Calgary. Like it was yesterday. There have been other deaths at the mustard seed over the years, suicide, other things like that. But that first OD, I believe, was 2004, 2005. That would be 25 years after the organization opened up. They're dealing with that every week now. And so that has changed the circumstance. And I think that's why you're seeing, again, both governments step up to say we want to help the men and women who are working on the front line deal with that crisis every day. Randy, I don't know if you want to add to that.
You want to do your question first?
Oh, I was just going to say, so is this the start of more? Are we going to see more coming up to deal maybe with more with fentanyl, not just homelessness, which is the result of the fentanyl?
Let me answer your other question, then I'll get to that one because it touches on a much larger international issue. It was 4 years ago in the last campaign, and I was 4 blocks up the street, and I saw a kid in front of one of the complexes turning blue. And a friend of his was hovering over him. And I said to my team, this kid's gonna die. Take out the naloxone kit. I didn't know how to do it, but I saw the CBC report on what to do. And I called 911 and I said, I got a kid, he's OD'd, he's turning blue, I've got the naloxone kit. And the dispatcher said, take out the syringe, put it right through his jeans, do it now. And we put the syringe in, got him, did the shot. And about 30 seconds later, he came to. His name was Caleb. He's 21 years old. And his friend didn't know how to help him. Those are the people we're helping. And the fentanyl crisis is an international crisis. 97% of precursors come from China. And our responsibility with the U.S. government is to get those precursors out of our country. It's why we called Mexican cartels criminal terrorist organizations, because too much of that stuff is coming into our countries. And we're going to listen and take Donald Trump seriously, but we're not taking his tariffs laying down. We're fighting back. We're not going to stop until he takes those tariffs off. When it comes to the security of people on the street and in our communities, that we take very seriously. So there will be more money. We've invested $1.3 billion in the border just in the last 6 weeks because we're serious about that. And when it comes to taking on criminal organizations in China that are trying to flood our streets with fentanyl, we're going to do everything in our power to stop that from happening in partnership with the United States to clean up our streets.
And again, I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that this is the only work that is taking place in this space.
Yeah.
This work is critical for the other work. This is what we're learning, is that we have to build connection points into the social services system on both ends for people to be able to get access, but also for aspects of the social services system to get access to other organizations to be able to provide, as I always say, the full power of the social services system and our nonprofit partners, over 6,000 that we depend on each and every day in the province, and bring that full power to bear, to be able to help individuals. Alberta alone, with our partners, is investing $9 billion in affordable housing between now and 2030. The federal government is investing in affordable housing as well. We have the largest investment in addiction treatment spaces taking place anywhere in the country. I know the Premier and Minister Williams just announced some of that investment again the other day. You're going to continue to see those large investments. But what we have learned, and I'm glad the federal government agrees and is partnering with us, is we have to connect those services to this population that we're talking about, and that's what this work is about today.
Thank you. We're going to move. Oh, we have someone else in here. Please go ahead.
On that note, realizing you might not have the data in front of you, but with people that are accessing the services, do you track them sort of through the system and understand where the gaps might be going forward with money?
Yeah, look, we've built, this actually would be the province, I think, who leads most of this, and the feds would come to us. Randy was, I think this is what he was alluding to, is wanting to partner with the government that probably is the most closest to the data to figure out where the resources need to move to. And so we certainly track data. We're increasing our ability to track data. And it's critical to be able to make decisions. Look, I think that we saw about 2 years ago, the shortage was in shelter spaces. The mayor of Edmonton continued to make that very clear to me. We responded to that. We saw that the data was that there needed to be support 24 hours a day, not just at nighttime in emergency shelters. We've responded to that. And now the data is showing that situation is stabilizing. So now we're moving to the next step. And what I'm most concerned about when it comes to the work that we're doing with frontline workers and organizations working with homelessness is, again, that navigation aspect. How we're making sure we're giving them the appropriate support to get access to the other services. You know, the Premier asked me once why I thought the navigation center had worked so well. And I told her a story when I worked frontline homeless work down the Mustard Seat in Calgary. We used to have to give out something called the Street Survival Guide. So somebody would come in, they got a diabetic issue going on with their foot, they need addiction treatment, they needed income supports, on and on and on, whatever would be going on. And I'd have to sit there with them and say, walk 3 blocks to here, walk 2 blocks to here, go get on the C train to here, here's a C train pass, whatever that would look like to get them to all their services. Well, that ain't going to work for somebody in that situation. That's why we struggled, right? And so us building this process into the system, when somebody comes and says, I need help, we're working that they will get all that help in one spot, and that nobody's got to tell them, go take the bus here or call this person or do that. And from that, I think we're going to see better results.
Alrighty. Is there anyone else in the room? Okay, go ahead.
You talked about the 4 cities getting services like this. What about the smaller areas like the Camrose, the Panokas, the Wetaskiwins, and because they're popping up all over the place. It's not just a big city problem anymore.
So we are already, as a province, getting well beyond the 7 largest cities. We have to. The homeless situation is changing in rural Alberta the same that it has anywhere in the province. When Minister Fraser called about this, I don't think he'd mind saying this. You know, their intention, I think the federal government, was to get this into Calgary and Edmonton quickly. I really emphasized what we were seeing. Alberta also is a little different than other provinces sometimes too, even in the way that we're spaced out, right? Like we don't have like the GTA or the Greater Vancouver area. We are really spread out, right? And so I talked a little bit about that with Sean, and you know, he just couldn't pull it off for all the cities at once, which is fair. But he got Lethbridge and Red Deer done with us. to show that we need to then move forward together. Now, the province is already investing in the communities that you are stating, and we will continue to work towards options that the feds could support us in some of the work that we're doing. I do want to be clear, as we start to get out of the 7 largest cities, we start to see very different challenges. I'm a rural Albertan. I come from very small community. We do experience homelessness. But the solutions that I use here in Edmonton to try to combat that ain't going to work in Sundre or Rocky Mountain House. And so we're going through a process right now where we have conversation with the communities to see what that looks like, whether that's partnering more with FCSS, whether that's using different type of assets that already exist inside those communities. And Robin James, the CEO of the Lethbridge Housing Authority, and MLA Wright are both chairing a joint task force that is looking at the next stage of how we tackle homelessness. Not just rural, but rural will be part of that conversation. But recognizing all this work that has been completed by all levels of government, now what are we going to do next? And so I'm looking forward to seeing their advice, and inside that report we'll have a lot of advice on how we tackle some of these rural Alberta problems.
Any follow-up? Perfect. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
Lisa McGregor with Global Edmonton.
Thanks so much. Mr. Nixon, why are you not renewing or providing the funding for SAFE, the Sexual Assault Center? They've put a lot of patients on hold, and it sounds like they're doing layoffs because of that lack of funding that they initially received in 2023. Essentially, it's a grant for 2 years, and they still need the money.
So my ministry does not fund sexual assault centers. So they might have in the past. That could be where some of that confusion comes. But ultimately, sexual assault centers are led by Minister Turton, who's the Minister of Children and Family Services. That said, my understanding, but I would refer to him for more specific details, is that they're funding sexual assault centers for, I believe, actually, I'm not going to say the number and say it wrong, but that it was a significant number that is still in this budget 2025. But he'd be the best one to get more details on from that question.
Thank you. Lisa, do you have a follow-up?
Okay, so just to confirm, no, thanks. Just to confirm, so did you, I guess 2 years ago, would that have been a grant that you were a part of, or would it have been him as well?
There are aspects of the ministry that I oversee is actually 3 ministries from 2 years ago. And during the process of merging seniors and housing, community and social services, and continuing care into one ministry, there are some aspects that have went to different ministries, and this is one of the aspects that went to Children's Services. So, I mean, I'd have to go look at the exact dates and when different things transfer, but it hasn't been in the budget of the ministry that I'm in charge of for at least 2 years. So I'm not the best one to give you the exact answer. I do know that they're still making significant investments in this area. It's important to the government, but I don't want to speak on behalf of the minister in case I get the number wrong.
Thanks. Operator, can you please
Okay, no worries, thank you.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Arzuma Kampor with Radio Canada.
Yes, thank you. This one is for Waterloo. It's going to be in French. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous parler de l'implication des communautés et des organisations locales dans la mise en œuvre de ces...
I'm going to pause you there, Radio Canada. Est-ce qu'on peut avoir plus de, can we have more volume in the room? Or can you get closer to your microphone, caller?
Yeah. Is that better?
Un peu, oui. C'est quoi la question?
Alors, la question, c'est est-ce que vous pouvez nous parler un peu plus de l'implication des communautés et des organisations locales dans la mise en œuvre, justement, de ces initiatives?
Oui, la province travaille en étroite collaboration avec la FCFA en ce qui concerne les besoins des francophones sans-abri. Ce qui est important avec ce financement, c'est que c'est un financement pour Edmonton, pour Calgary, pour Lethbridge et Red Deer, et c'est un financement de 35 millions du fédéral, 35 millions de l'Alberta. Et c'est très important parce qu'on a vu un dédoublement des personnes sans-abri qui sont sans-abri, vraiment. Et dans un hiver où on a eu des températures de moins 30, c'est très important qu'on ait la capacité, comme on est ici à Maddie's Place, pour les gens qui sont sans-abri, qui habitent sur les rues et qui ont besoin d'un foyer abordable, mais aussi accommodant à leurs besoins.
Do you have a follow-up?
Et est-ce que vous pouvez aussi, yes, I do. Est-ce que vous pouvez nous parler aussi des stratégies complémentaires de prévention justement de l'itinérance? Quelles sont celles qui sont envisagées ou financées dans le cadre de ces initiatives-là? Et peut-être du plus vaste programme avec les 5 milliards de dollars.
Oui, absolument. Regarde, le fédéral approche cette question d'une approche pan-gouvernementale. Ma collègue, ministre Yara Sachs, est responsable des santé mentale et des addictions. Et on vient juste de dévoiler la première tranche d'un fonds d'un demi-milliard de dollars pour la santé mentale des jeunes. Et la collaboration qu'on a avec la province en ce qui concerne les addictions et la santé mentale, c'est très important parce que vous savez que le déploiement des services de santé sont faits par la province et sur les territoires locaux par Alberta Health Services. Et donc, c'est un partenariat qui est très important. Quand on a versé les 25 milliards de dollars à l'Alberta pour 10 ans pour les services en santé, un quart de ce financement était pour la santé mentale, et le collègue de M. Nixon, Mme Lagrange, est responsable pour ce déploiement. Just for everybody in the room, the question was, do we do this in a pan-governmental approach? And the answer is your work with Adriana Lagrange, Minister of Health, and the work of Health Services to get the mental health and addiction support out to communities is a part of the solution to getting people the helps and supports they need.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Jack Farrell, the Canadian Press.
I just have a question for Minister Nixon, and it's a money question for you. So it's my understanding the federal money, $35 million over 2 years, and Alberta is matching that. But then in the news release that just went out, it says, budget 2025, if passed, will have $213 million into homeless initiatives. So I guess my question is, can you confirm that matching bit and essentially expand on what the province's overall homeless initiative budget will look like in 2025?
Well, we'll have more details and estimates in a couple of days, I'm sure, where we can have more detailed conversations on breaking down that almost $250 million number on homeless supports. Our matching number is in that $250 million in budget 2025, which I think answers your main question. Again, we intend to continue that level of commitment. It's the largest amount invested in homeless supports in the history of the province. And I intend to continue that for multiple future years because of the critical work there. We do think that you'll see more increases now that we have stabilized the emergency shelter system in other things that are closer to housing projects. Projects like where we are today, post and pre-treatment housing, navigation supports, these type of areas is where we want to put our next rounds of money now that we have stabilized the emergency shelter system. The emergency shelter system is the emergency room of homelessness, and now we want to take that and expand that elsewhere. I do think this also expands on your earlier question we got, and I do have the numbers actually in front of me, so I will be happy to give that right now. I didn't realize that's what these numbers were. The breakdown this year, which partway through the fiscal year will be just almost 4,300,000 roughly going to Calgary, 7 million, about 7.5 million to Edmonton, Lethbridge about 3.2 million, Red Deer nothing in the first year, meaning that they're saving up for a bigger project, which you're about to see. The following fiscal year, which is the year that we're in, will be 9 million going to Calgary, 6 million, just over 6 million to Edmonton, just over 1 million to Lethbridge, and then almost 3.5 million to Red Deer. So you get kind of a rough idea how that breakdown, how that money is going to be distributed, and why it's not exact every year is obviously some of those different projects may require different resources. So as we go through the grant process, they're trying to make sure they get everything that everybody needs funded in the right year. I don't know if you got a follow-up, Jack.
No, that's all I needed. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Operator, can you please put through the next caller?
Sean Amato, City News.
Hi there. I have a question for Mr. Boisenau, please. There's talk that Mr. Mark Carney might run for a seat in Edmonton, probably Edmonton Centre. So are you willing to step aside and let your new leader challenge for a seat there?
You must have been talking to CBC. They asked me the same question yesterday on the way into caucus. No, I'm the candidate for Edmonton Centre, and I'm running in Edmonton Centre. I've been the candidate in Edmonton Centre since August of 23. Look, the new leader is going to have lots of choices for a seat. His family is in Ottawa. But look, if he wants to run in Edmonton, there's lots of seats available. It will be a greater challenge to do that. But look, we know how to win elections here in certain parts of the city. Jason and I were teasing each other about that earlier. I won't be running in Sundre anytime soon, but I'm running in Edmonton Centre.
I just add to that with we would love to see the Prime Minister designate to come and run in Sundre, Alberta, where I'm from, if he would like. We would welcome him with open arms to the campaign. I suspect he won't take us up on that offer, though.
I guess if you run in Edmonton Centre, he'll run in
Exactly. That would be, yes.
Big battle.
I think I'll decline that offer as well.
Sean, do you have a follow-up?
I do. Mr. Boyes, I know your term has not been without controversy. Obviously, you're no longer a cabinet minister. You're no longer in charge of Jasper. So I guess the question is, why should voters trust you? Why should you be the candidate?
I'm the candidate again because I believe fundamentally in Edmonton Centre, in Albertans, in our ability in Canada to stand up to the existential threat that is Donald Trump. And look, I understand how government works. Some of the announcements we're making here today are because of the work that I've done. Last week, $20 million for arts and culture funding, of which over $8.5 million is staying here in our province. And look, you alluded to it, Sean, so let me put it very clearly. I sued my former business partner. I've been meeting with Indigenous leaders and Indigenous communities on a regular basis. We just announced last week $100 million in Canada Infrastructure Bank funding at Enoch Cree Nation. The chief invited me particularly to come and participate in that investment. So this is the time when you stand up for your community, you stand up for the riding. And quite frankly, I spent 4 days in Washington 2 weeks ago. And I can tell you that is a nation divided, and we have to be on guard. So I'm going to do my part to make sure that the voice of Edmonton and Albertans are represented in the federal government. It's a neck-and-neck race now. It's a neck-and-neck race now in Edmonton Centre. It's the same thing federally. So I'm going to do what I do best, which is go knock doors, talk to community members, and earn their support as we close in on an election which could be called very soon.
Thanks, operator. We have time for a couple more questions, so can you please put through the last caller?
Cindy Tran, the Edmonton Journal.
Hi, my question is directed to Minister Nixon. From my understanding, this funding was supposed to be coming in the fall, finalized for the winter, in time for planning for encampments in the winter time. I'm just wondering, what was the delay there?
This agreement has been signed since this fall between both governments. The implementation of the agreement has already been taking place. Frankly, the delay is coordinating announcements between two governments, but it hasn't stopped the work of both the federal and the provincial government. Multiple grant agreements have already been signed. Money is starting to flow. How that works is it flows actually through the Alberta government, the feds send through us, and then we manage the grant agreements. But Minister Fraser and I came to this agreement in the fall on schedule, as we committed to, prior to him leaving his post.
Do you have a follow-up, Cindy?
Okay, thank you. And no follow-up. Thank you.
Perfect. That concludes today's press conference. Thank you all for joining us.